Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast, and welcome to the monthly meta. It's April 2021. So every month, on the first Monday of every month, we get together and we have a look at two things in Blood Bowl. We look at what's legal and what's lethal. So we look at just what is available in the format, what's come out from Games Workshop, what's come out from the NAF, basically all the cool things you can put into your Blood Bowl tournaments and your Blood Bowl leagues. And then we look at what's lethal. And part of that is looking ahead to see what the tournament formats are going to be over the next month and a bit. And then we look back to see which teams did pretty well in the month before. The whole idea is that we get together, we have a look at what's going on in Blood Bowl, who's doing well, what you can kind of expect when tournaments open up, and really just to keep our hand in with Blood Bowl as a competitive game. So UK wise, obviously not a lot of tournaments going on at the moment. We are allowed to play in the garden, so I would imagine to see a couple of things, but only up to 6 people in your garden, so not quite the tournaments that we're used to. However, kind of from July on, there are some tournaments that are popping up that are basically fully booked. So we've got our first one on the 3rd of July, hopefully. That is all sold out. That's sold out in a day. And there are more tournaments coming in the UK. So it's April now. We've only got a few months left. Anyway, let's have a look at what's legal. So currently, as it stands, we're in format 2020 11D. Blood Bowl 2020, Spike 11, and D as in the amount of kind of accessories that we've got available. So at the moment, everything legal in Blood Bowl. You've got the 2020 rulebook, you've got Spike 11, you've got the Teams of Legend PDF, so Amazons, Norse, Chaos Dwarf, High Elf, Tomb Kings and Vampires are all eligible. You've got Acorn, which is a star player just available in White Dwarf 458. You can get it digitally as well, so you can go and get Acorn whenever you want him. There's the NAF tournament guidelines, which includes Slan and Khorne, so 2 more teams that whose playstyle I think really is very unique and a really good addition to Blood Bowl. If you're playing a NAF tournament or you're running a league, can recommend Slan and Khorne. There's the FAQ as well from Games Workshop, which cleared up some of the questions. Definitely worth a read if you're playing some more Blood Bowl. And then there's the special play cards and pitches. So what have we seen now? We've seen the Dwarf one, we've seen the Necro team, we've seen Skaven, we've seen Halflings as well. And we've got next weekend, the Black Orc and Nobility teams. They've got their dice landing and they've got their card pack. So if you are a player that likes to use the special play cards, grab those because there's going to be probably some unique special play cards for those. Now, coming up this Saturday is very exciting for Blood Bowl because the pre-orders are going up for Spike 12, that's Nobility and Black Orc teams, and Death Zone. Okay, there's some extra stuff coming as well. You've got the dice and card packs for Nobility and Black Orcs, which is pretty cool. But you've got the Sevens pitches landing, and then you've got Death Zone. So Spike 12 doesn't look like it's going to add anything. I think we might have some ball rules or something like that. But Death Zone is where the new rules are going to be. We still don't know everything that's in the Death Zone magazine. Book. Doesn't even matter. We've got Sevens rules in there, so really interested to find out what it changed about the format. Now, Sevens is a quick play Blood Bowl variant, smaller pitch, smaller teams, smaller time frame. My favourite way to play it. I'm interested to see if they've made any significant changes to Sevens, because we're seeing a lot of Sevens tournaments pop up around the world now, which is fantastic. In fact, one of the tournaments we're going to look back at is a Sevens tournament from America, I think, and we've got George running the Sydney Bowl series in Australia as well. So it's so good to see Sevens spreading, and hopefully with this and the fact you can just pick up a G-Dub pitch is going to make that so much more accessible, so much more unified, and we're going to see more Sevens because I do genuinely recommend it. But in standardized Blood Bowl, this one here has got some rules for mercenaries. And what we've seen so far is that there's going to be 5 different types of mercenary. There's one called the Big Guy, okay? The Bonafide Big Guy, which is a kind of downgraded ogre as it stands. But it comes in at something like 130k, and you can upgrade it to a rat ogre, essentially. It's going to allow an inducement for basically all teams, and they're going to have some upgrades. So it's going to be really interesting to see whether that is league specific. I imagine it's just going to say inducement. So watch out for tournament formats going forward to probably exclude those. Now, most tournament formats are Resurrection, and they say it's basically TV buy. So you build your roster and you buy your inducements to a certain level. You front up the cash and there's no inducement step. It saves so much time and maths during a tournament that it's just always kind of been a really good way to do it. Now, it hurts those teams with low-cost linemen, but actually you tend to have them be tier 3 and they get a lot of extra inducement, fat cash anyway, basically. But the Mercenaries, if they are tournament legal, and we will definitely see some tournaments that allow them, that is going to massively change up some of the teams. So we've got the Bonafide big guy. There is an upgrade that allows you to give it Claws, Frenzy, Prehensile Tail, and Wild Animal for 20k. So if 150k, you kind of get a slow Rat Ogre. That can be taken by Lustrian teams. So you could look at a kind of double Crocs Lizard build, Amazons with a Rat Ogre, basically. It's going to be really interesting to see if tournaments, or how many tournaments involve that. From our standpoint, we think that actually Mercenaries have never really been part of tournaments. So as a league inducement, it's fantastic. So if you're punching up 200k, taking a Rat Ogre could be a really good balancing point if you've got nothing particularly missing from your team. From a tournament point of view, what it does is it opens up the builds a little bit too much, and it can allow teams to fill gaps in their permanent roster that perhaps isn't necessarily required. So an Amazon team, for example, with a Rat Ogre and 4 Blitzers is going to be even stronger. So there's definitely some interesting bits there. However, it's a very cool inducement to League, and as soon as this drops, we'll grab a copy and we'll talk through the rules, especially when it comes to those 7s formats. So there's a couple of things in 7s that could change. The pitch has stayed the same, which is fantastic news because that means the core of the game should be alright. We're interested to see the team build rules. So we've had a couple of different variants over 7's period, basically, which was one was half positional. So if you've got a 0 to 2 positional, it's 0 to 1. If you've got 0 to 4, it's 0 to 2. And you can take all of them in a team. The second and the current 7's meta, and has been for a good few years now, is 0 to 4 positionals total. So every team can only have 4 positionals. Now, if you've got a 0 to 4 positional like Gutter Runners, you can take all 4. But those are all the positionals you've got, and all of our 7's videos are built for that format. So if we see a big change to that, then I've got a lot of videos to do, which will be fun, because actually then we get to explore the new build meta. But also it's going to change up the game a little bit. There are strengths and weaknesses to both formats. I like 0 to 4 positionals total because it allows you to kind of... It varies up the builds you've got. On the other hand, if you take the half roster size, basically, you allow new players to actually play the whole team. It's going to help things like Snotlings. It's going to help teams like Nurgle, who kind of can afford to take those positionals but are normally barred by the positional limit. Going to be really interesting to see with 7's, and if they change that core piece, it will change 7's completely. And as we move on to what's lethal in Blood Bowl at the moment, we do have the standardized stay safe message. So in the UK, you can now socialize with up to 6 people outside, maintaining distance, etc, etc, etc. So you can have mini Blood Bowl tournaments, but please do stay safe. Try not to do it indoors at the moment, but it's only going to be a few more weeks before that's open up, hopefully. Now, this is a little bit of a bad sign because a lot of Europe is having a really tough time maintaining safety, basically, when it comes to a coronavirus angle. So we're seeing some tournaments get cancelled. There's even one in Canada in the last month that's been postponed again because of coronavirus restrictions. So UK tournaments kind of start up in July, so we've got a couple of months to weather. It was the bank holiday weekend and the restrictions have dropped, and there's a lot of concern perhaps that the virus may pick up again and we might see a bit of a stall. So stay safe if you are playing Blood Bowl. The other point of this is that some of the tournaments we looked at last month may not have happened. There's a couple that haven't got the stats registered, and there's a couple coming up in the future that I'm not sure if they will happen, but we're still going to look at the formats and we're still going to have a look at the tournaments we looked at last month. So last month we have a look at the Winter Sleet 2021 tournament. Unfortunately, no results posted, so interesting to see whether it went ahead. Doesn't actually say, or maybe the NAF just haven't updated the scores yet. But that was the 13th of March in Norway. 1 day, 4 games, 1.15 million builds, so 1,150,000. No stars except with stunty teams and 6 primary only. So that was one of the first tournaments we saw where there was no adjustment to cost or skills for tiers, only star players. So it'd be interesting to see if that one went ahead and whether we can find out kind of which teams came ahead in a more balanced format. And the other one we don't have results for is Blitzball 2021, which was a 2-dayer, 5 games in New Zealand. Now, this one was the more kind of standardized format that we're looking at the moment, which is the 1.1 for Tier 1, 1.15 for Tier 2, and 1.2 for Tier 3. No Acorn, which is terrible. And skills, 5 primary or 4 primary, 1 secondary for Tier 2, or 4 primary and 2 secondary for Tier 3. So that's really kind of what we're seeing most of the time when it comes to formatting. No results posted, but it did only take place last weekend, so it could just be that the stats haven't uploaded. I'll check next month. If we've got them, then we'll have a look. However, the FFBL Leprechaun Bowl for 7s did go ahead, which is awesome. So I love this. Right, 7s format. Everyone got a Leprechaun as well. Really good fun. Check out last month's monthly meta for kind of some details on that tournament. I love the idea of it. The FFBL guys, I think I've got another tournament coming up this month. Another 7s tournament. So watch out for those. Watch out for Sydney Bowl to adjust their rule kit depending on Death Zone landing next 2 weeks' time. Anyway, this one happened on the 13th of March in the US of A, and Snotlings came first. So that is a little bit... You're thinking, wow, really? But actually, they've got Swarming. And I'm sure if you've guys seen some of our Top 5 Fridays, you know I absolutely dote on some of the little Snotling players. Wagons are great fun, but honest to goodness, those stilty runners are incredibly good. So watch out for them, because I think they're amazing for, what is it, 20k, 30k? Bargains. Anyway, first place went to Snotlings. Second place went to Necro. And this is just... 7s is a great format because you've got a little bit more space, because you've got a little bit less players, and because you've got that positional limit. It allows all teams to kind of go in at a fair whack. Most touchdowns, Halflings. Most casualties, Ogres. First place, Snotlings, and Necro coming in second. Love every single thing about that. I love that all the teams are represented. You've got some great stunty stuff there, and everybody got to play. Which kind of brings us to the team of the month here, which is the top stunty team, which is Snotlings. And that is not just because they won a 7s tournament. Sometimes you can spike and win a tournament, but Snotlings we have seen represented over the course of doing monthly meta repeatedly. You know, they came first, they won this, they did most touch. Snotlings have performed brilliantly. And I know, what was it? There was a 4-0 drubbing in one of the tournaments we looked at, which is fantastic. There's a lot of variety in Snotlings. There's a lot of flexibility. In 7s, they've got Swarming, so they can use their numbers to the most advantage possible. In 11s, I'm pretty sure they've got access to some good star players, so you can play a really solid game. But the Snotlings themselves, if anybody's ever played a Snotling-only team or Nobbler-only team, you will know that actually, as a core thing, and now they're 15k, so they've dropped by 5k, which doesn't sound like a lot unless you're running 10 of them. There's just so many, and quite frankly, movement 5, 2++ dodging everywhere is going to be really effective. If you're brave enough to take those big pows, you're going to pull it off every now and again. And it only needs to go right once for you to pull off that upset. So good job, Snotlings. Basically, the team of the month. Okay, so we're only going to look at a couple of tournaments this time round. It's looking a little bit dubious in some places, based on postponements and things like that. And just from a variety of rule set, there's not a lot different going on. There was one cool one. There's a kind of team vibe, but that involves trading players and stuff. There's some cool stuff out there, but for what we're looking at here is kind of close to standard-ish. This one here, I cannot remember what it's called in English, like Between Heroes or something like this. 2nd of May in France. Now, France is gone into its 3rd COVID lockdown. So the likelihood of this one going ahead is medium. We'll have to wait and find out. But what we're going to do is just have a quick look at the format anyway. 1 day, 3 games, which we're seeing a lot of. Team value. This is interesting. So we've seen this before as well. 1.1 for Tier 1. 1.1 for Tier 1.5. So they've snuck in that additional tier. There's 4 tiers in this tournament. And we've seen this in a couple of the European ones. So Tier 1 and Tier 1.5 get 1.1 million. Tier 2 get 1.15. And Tier 3 get 1200 basically. 4 tiers now. So Tier 1.5 Necro and Nobility have been busted up into that weird little middle ground. Now if you look at the skill distribution, it's 30 SPP for Tier 1, 36 for Tier 1.5 and Tier 2, and 48 for Tier 3, sorry. So what you end up with here is the Necro and Nobility have the same cash as Tier 1, but they get 6 SPP extra, Really interesting that we've seen that a couple of times now, and it could just be a copycat thing, or it is possibly that people are seeing those teams overperform. Now I'm running a nobility team in Fumble, which means I get access to basically everything except running pass. They're good. They're not brilliant. They're as good as Chaos. You know, it's kind of that. They've got some good starting skills, but they are expensive as heck. Okay, so interesting that we're seeing people rate them as a tier above the rest of tier 2. Necro, I get they are high performers when it works, but again, high price. So Necro having a price decrease, but still getting the skills. I can understand it. I don't think it's necessary, especially if you consider some of the other tier 2 teams, High Elves, Pro Elves. There's some teams in there that are going to perform really well. Black Orcs are going to do great. 36 SPP on Black Orcs is a lot of regular skills, and yeah, I think that's going to boost them up pretty well. So I like this one. Hopefully it can go ahead safely, because that's going to give us more kind of feedback on what teams are performing well and what really is becoming one of the more standardized formats of tournament. And the last tournament we're going to look at today is the Rosenstadt Rumble. So this one's taking place on the 10th and 24th of April in Oregon, USA. So it's a 2-day, 4-game tournament. I wanted to highlight this one because this is a really clever way to get a tournament in when you've got a small time window. And I don't know, I like the idea of having a tournament spaced over 2 weeks. It's kind of like a mini league. Imagine that, 2 evenings of Blood Bowl, where you go in and you play 2 games and you move on with your life. I think it's really quite interesting to spread it over. It's not potentially something we'll do, we'd rather do more like a tournament series, but that's kind of what this one plays out to be. However, what we're going to be looking at is, 1, the fact they've split it over 2 days, 2 games each day. I love that. That's clever. That's a good way to get the game in. Can be difficult for coaches to attend. So what we're planning on doing in February with our next 2-day tournament is have 2 different tournaments, but have your scores add up to have a weekend winner and a Saturday winner and a Sunday winner. We're hoping to have one day as 7s and one day as 11s. So basically, if you can only attend one day, you get a choice of what format you want to play. If you can attend both days, all your results count. This is a cool way to do that as well. But this is a really vanilla build. Now, this is what we wanted to look at with one of the tournaments that hadn't posted results for last month. 1,200 all in for everybody. 36 SPPs all in for everybody. They've got randoms are allowed. So if you want to take a random skill, you can pay those SPP, but they are being rolled with the TO at registration. And to be honest with you, if you're playing a 2-game evening session, you will have a little bit extra time to do that. It's not like you're trying to fit 3 or 4 games in one big old day. Actually, you've got 5 hours set aside. You can do it. It's going to be fine. So this is going to give us a really good idea at power levels for teams from a standardized point of view. Now, it's so good to see Necro winning, to see tier 3 teams winning and performing really well, because that means that the tier system fundamentally works. It adds a little bit of incentive to play those underpowered teams, which means you're not always going to end up with the top 10 teams being played. There's 29 teams in Blood Bowl. If we can get one of each at every tournament, it's going to have a ton of variety. And that just means that every game you play is going to be different. And that's one of the best things here about Blood Bowl. That's why they always go crazy with and adding Fumble secret teams. Mixed teams. Cannot wait to hit that in 2020 as well. So 36 SPP with random skills. That is going to allow us to kind of check different teams' power levels. There's going to be some teams and some players that prefer the opportunity to roll a random skill for less SPP. But you can actually just go and chuck in all your SPP on one player. Have 2 skills. Well, 1 skill and 1 double. There's a ton of stuff, and it's going to help players kind of gauge what's useful and what to save for in League. Anyway, that is going to wrap up April's monthly meta. Can't believe we're in April already. This here, the Death Zone, is the biggest change to Blood Bowl 2020 since being allowed to play it. So really interesting to see how much of the tournament formats this affects, but also some of the cool stuff you can do with regular teams in League using the Mercenary rules. There's some extra pitch rules and stuff in there as well, which is going to be really cool. And that 7s element is huge for those people out there who love 7s. I'm hoping that it's going to introduce more players to 7s, because 7s is the kill team. It's the war cry of AOS 40k, but of Blood Bowl. So if you've got an hour to spend, play a 7s game. You're going to have a great time. You've got 2 hours, 3 hours to just play a few 7s games. Try out those different teams. And yeah, I love sevens. Go watch Seven Super Series. We've got 2 of them up there. It's fantastic. It's great fun. You can see the teams develop and it's just awesome. So I am personally dying to find out the full rules in this, and believe me guys, the second we get our hands on this book, we will be going through it in real detail. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up now. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what tournaments you're excited for, what you're seeing out there, what you're hearing. Please let us know if there's a tournament you want us to break down as well, because hopefully with the world reopening soon, we can start taking a bit of a deep dive into some of the tournaments coming up, and we can recommend some teams for those builds, especially because we're seeing what's being successful in the format so far. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Happy blocking, and we'll see you soon. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to support the show even further, please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. Or come and join us in our Patreon, link below, where you get early access to our content and monthly competitions. See you later.